Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Psych Legal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Brooke Brigham, I'm the attorney.
And I'm Tess Brigham, I'm the therapist.
And today we have a very special episode. We have two guests, Melanie and Cory, who are married, and they have a very successful YouTube show. They go by the name Notes to Self 444, and they have a YouTube channel. They're also on TikTok and Instagram, and they talk primarily about sister wives and about polygamy and about the AUB, the church that the Brown family came from, and also Melanie and Cory came from the AUB. And so we're going to get into that. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this. One night I was scrolling through TikTok and a video came up and you started talking, Melanie, and you said, you know, my father is the current prophet of the AUB and I grew up and I'm just like, what? Who is this person? And at the time, I think you had just started talking about, this was not too long ago, like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
And so I watched all of your TikTok videos and then you started the YouTube channel and you guys have a lot of content on there. You do live, you after the episode, do you do it while the episode is airing? You watch it on the YouTube?
No, I have done that twice recently, but before it was just, we would do it the next day.
Okay. Yeah. So you go through the episodes the next day, and then sometimes you just talk about a certain topic. And then tons of people are asking you questions, writing in questions, and you answer people's questions. So it's just really great. So if you could both just maybe, introduce yourselves, like how you grew up and, your story in being in the church and then no longer being in the church. Just kind of give us an idea of your history.
So yeah, I guess I'll go first. So
okay.
I actually started my podcast on YouTube first, and my children told me, Mom, you got to get on TikTok and do shorter form content so people know who you are, and then tell little clip stories. So that's kind of how I got on TikTok, and then TikTok blew up. But yeah, I was born and raised in the AUB. My parents were both converted by the original prophet of the AUB, or the original leader of the AUB, which was Christine Brown's grandfather. And so he's the one who converted my dad. And so, yeah, I born and raised. I'm my mother's first child, and I'm my father's third child. So, my mom's the second wife, and my mom had 11 children. I grew up with 4 mothers and 34 siblings. So there was quite a lot of us. He's since had a lot more wives since then, but that's what I grew up with. That was the general gist of it. I am the oldest of, there's 3 older grandchildren older than me, but I was like the oldest girl, basically, out of about 350 grandchildren.
Wow.
In the polygamous community. So yeah, it was tough. It was a tough way to grow up, for sure. I got married a week after I turned 17 and had my first baby 9 months later.
Wow.
So I was a very young mom. And then I ended up leaving the AUB at 22 years old, almost 23. And then I had a sick baby and I ran back. I thought God was punishing me, and I ran back to the AUB at 23. So I was only gone for about a year, and then ran back to there and stayed until I was about 25 and left for good at 25.
Wow. Is this in Montana or Utah?
I was born and raised in Utah.
Okay.
So yeah. So it was definitely a long journey of being married 10 years in an abusive relationship in the AUB, for sure. We dated and courted a couple of girls, but never actually became a sister wife. Just went through the dating process. So that's, in a nutshell, there's my life. And then Cory and I got married. I left the AUB permanently at 25. Cory and I got together we got married when I was 27. So we've been together 25 years now.
Wow. And you have kids together?
We do. I had 3 children when we got married, and then we have 2 together. So we have 5 total.
Kids.
Wow.
And 2 grandchildren. Yep.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. They're the love of our lives. We absolutely adore them. We do adopt 2 other grandchildren. I basically raised my little brother too, and his 2 little kids call us grandparents too. So we have the 4 that we claim. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really fun. So go ahead.
I was very similar. My mom was the second wife. I was the firstborn of the second wife. I have 2 older brothers from a previous marriage. We moved up to Montana when I was a kid, probably 4 or 5 years old. Probably around that time. And my dad had 9 wives and 39 kids in one great big house, and then they had a smaller house right next door. So I was raised in,
Oh my gosh,
we called it the compound or the ranch up in Montana. And so, yeah, I'm the oldest of my mom's kids, and my dad's third of my dad's kids too. So 39 kids is what he raised all in one house or 2 houses. But we all did dinner together, and I left and came down here to Utah, left the AUB at 18, and then I was excommunicated a little bit later. So, and haven't been back. I wasn't going to date anybody within the AUB, and then
I wooed him.
I met him. And so I just, we made an agreement that I wasn't going back. We weren't going back to the AUB. We weren't going to be polygamous. And so after that agreement, we got married. So,
yeah.
Growing up, what was the feeling that you had about what was happening around you, for example? Because at 17, when you got married, Melanie, were you thinking, oh, this is great, I'm getting married, I'm an adult, I'm starting my life? Or were you like, what am I doing? What's happening?
Yeah, it was more that.
It was like, so inside, did you always feel like there's something, I don't know if this is for me, I don't know?
Yeah, it was the circumstances around why I got married were, my dad had doubled up. We'd always lived in our own homes. Each wife had their own home. And then on my 16th birthday, he doubled us all up. And there just wasn't space. There were 17 children in a 2,000 square foot house, and there just wasn't space for me. I didn't have a bed. I didn't have a dresser. I didn't have anywhere to sleep. I slept on the floor quite often for a year before I got married, because it was on my 16th birthday that we moved in. And I had purchased a car when I was 16 and a half, and that's where I kept my clothes mostly. Wow. And I just didn't have anywhere to be. There was no space for me. So this man came along, and, my parents were very concerned about a relationship that I had started forming with another boy, and they did not approve of that boy. So this other, my ex-husband came along, and he was approvable, and it was like, hey, here you go. There's just really no space for you here. So get married and let someone else take care of you. Mm-hmm. And so that was more the circumstances behind why I got married so young. So
okay. That sounds terrifying. I mean,
yeah.
I can't imagine. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And also, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, Cory, so you say you got excommunicated. What was the reason for that? Is because you didn't follow along with the program, or?
I didn't follow any of the rules of the AUB. I was disobedient in every way. So, and they just wanted me. It's interesting. The ranch is owned by the AUB, and they just, I was leaving anyhow. I had a job down here in Utah. We were starting a company, and I was packing up my bags. And so they basically did the excommunication. And in the excommunication, it was like, you're no longer allowed on priesthood property. Never come back. And I've disobeyed that too. I go up and see my family all the time. So I've disobeyed everything that I was taught growing up. I was frustrated with the way that I was raised and the double standard on everything. And so I disobeyed a lot. So I wasn't a very good older son. They expected me to be, because I was the firstborn into the
That's a
principle.
Big deal.
Yeah.
I was supposed to follow all the rules, get many wives. And growing up with 9 women in the same house, I didn't ever want to get married. So
you saw what was in your future. Yeah.
When I got out, I didn't want a relationship. I didn't want to get married. And so I was very stubborn and didn't get married till I was 29. So
yeah. Oh, you
30.
were 30 when we got married. Yeah, he was 30 when we got married.
I was not, I had no, I don't know. I had no plans on getting married and having kids. I was just done with the noise and I liked being alone. I liked the quietness of my own space. So,
yeah. Did you guys meet because of the AUB or did you meet randomly or?
Yeah, what's funny is that we grew up, we had so many mutual friends, but we never knew each other until after I had left the AUB. And so my best friend was married to his brother. Yeah. And so my ex-husband and I, we owned a houseboat down in Lake Powell, which is a big lake here in Utah. So we owned a houseboat and we invited my best friend and her husband and they said, hey, can we bring some of our brothers? So they brought some of their brothers, which was Cory and a couple of the other boys. And that's when I met him. And we just became good friends because I was married with children. I had no intention. I didn't think I was ever going to get divorced. And so we just became really good friends. And I just liked him as a person. And I was safe so he could be like his regular self because I was safe because I was married. And so he could just banter and we could get along really, really well. So it wasn't until that's really when we met. And I had already left the AUB. This is during the year that I had left the AUB. And so that's when we met. And then so we only saw each other once a year for 3 years while he would come down to our houseboat once a year for 3 years. And then that's just, And then when I got divorced, I called him and said, hey, you want to go out? And he was like, what? So he was stunned because he was like, wait, but we had so many mutual friends growing up and we just never crossed paths. We just never saw each other. The AUB has got about 10,000 members in it. And so there's a lot of people there I don't know. I know of, or I know, I'm acquaintances with them, but there's a lot of people in there that makes it easy to not know. And where I got married so young, I was off the market. And so I was wrapped up in my children. I wasn't wrapped up in anything else. So yeah.
I'm curious about your siblings growing up. Were the two of you, did both of you feel a little bit like outliers? Or was it, no, there was a good chunk of the kids that were not happy or would complain. And so what was the makeup? Do you think like half of the kids weren't happy, or is it, and then there was like maybe 1 or 2 that were going along with the program?
Out of 39 children that my dad and the mothers raised, 3 of them are still a part of the
Wow.
36
so
of them
interesting.
left there. And I had an older brother that had left too. But when we left, we built a home down here. And so anytime anybody wanted to leave the AUB, they could come and stay with us. There were 3 of us brothers that had a home down here in Utah. And we had brothers coming down, sisters. They were all leaving. They were exhausted of the environment, especially the environment of the compound up in. If you watch Big Love, you got the city. We were the compound on Big Love.
And that comes with a whole different social structure there.
Oh, I can imagine.
With here. Yeah. And out of our 34 kids, only 5 of them, I think, are still a part of it or have anything. Now, when you're young and you're growing up, then so many of them married into that, but they didn't stay. They left. And so that's same with in Cory's family. Yeah. He had quite a few sisters marry that way because they, out of obligation, thought they had to, whatever. And then they left afterwards and kind of like I did. So, and back in the day, I tell this on one of my podcasts, out of the 350 grandchildren, no one had left before. There was you just didn't do that. You didn't get married that way. Now there had been kids who had rebelled and never gotten married that way, but I was the first one to leave, to have gotten married in the polygamist church. I never legally got married. I only got married in the church. And then I was the first one to leave.
Wow.
So that
what happened after, like, what was the reaction of your parents?
Oh, it was brutal. It was really hard. My grandma was probably the worst to me out of everyone. She was really, really harsh on me because I was now setting an example, and it kind of gave an unspoken permission for a lot of other people to leave too. And so, yeah, I got treated very, very poorly. And what's interesting to me is some of the people who treated me the most poorly have now left the AUB and have TV shows. And so it's just funny to watch. So sometimes I'll yell at the TV like, really? Well, you treated me like when I left. Are you kidding me? So that's interesting to me sometimes when I watch. And I know we all have to evolve and come to our own, conclusions when we get there. But yeah, it was hard. I was treated extremely poorly. So,
and then when you came back after that year, how was it then? Were they nice? Was it nice again? Or were you still like, oh, well, you left?
Yeah, a lot of that. I do a podcast on an us versus them mentality in cults. And it was very much, I was an us and then I became a them. And then when I came back, I was welcomed back, but I was always welcomed back just at an arm's length, because now I was like, not quite one of them, but not quite one of us either. So yeah.
How does one become the prophet? Like, how did your father get that position? And what is the process of that? Who decides that?
So they have, you start, with, he's smirking. You start at, there's different positions, bishops, 70s, and you just kind of work your way up eventually. So when I was 19, my dad was put on the leadership, and there's 12 apostles. It's built very much the same as the LDS church. There's 12 apostles and then one prophet, and it's supposed to go seniority. But the AUB makes up their rules as they go along. It depends on what your last name is. And my dad just worked his way up in seniority. The last prophet died, and my dad was the next in line.
Okay.
So
how is your family treated differently since he's the prophet? Was there a real distinction of how you and your family versus other families?
Well, I haven't been around the AUB since he has been the prophet. He's only been around for about 3 years. And so that's why people started speaking out publicly. Some of my siblings, that was a huge wake-up call for my siblings, where I kind of went through that at 19 when he was put on the leadership. And I was like, wait, what? I grew up with this man. How is he a leader? And so, and he is very much a leader. And I'm not trying to, just from the child's perspective, and it was hard to watch him be put in a leadership position for me. So I went through a lot of that deconstruction stuff, or, crisis of faith stuff way back then, whereas that now my siblings are like, wait, what? How is he? So a lot of my siblings are now just coming to that. So they started speaking out publicly, and which motivated me to speak out publicly, because I felt like some of them got misrepresented. And so that's why I started speaking out publicly about it. So I had no intention of ever speaking publicly about it. But when I watched a couple of my siblings be, interviewed and stuff like that, it felt like a huge misrepresentation. So, yeah, so I just decided to start my own thing and start talking about it. People tell us all the time, you guys need to write books. Like, you need to talk about your childhood. And my daughter says to us the other day, you guys need to do funny stories about dad growing up. I'm like, little girl, they're not funny. Dad just tries to make them funny so that they're less dramatic as we share them.
Yeah. I think what is so interesting about you guys, and why so many people are, just hungry for information from you, is because the Sister Wives television show has not been honest. It's just been a lie. We've come to find out this has just been a lie from day one. And they're just now starting to, be honest about some things. And so to hear you talk about how it really was, it's like, yes, and like you said, now all of these people they've all left too, and they probably would have left a lot sooner if they weren't on this TV show, because they weren't happy.
Right.
So that's what's so just, I think, fascinating, that you're willing and able to talk about this so openly and honestly.
Oh, we try to dump some humor into it to soften it a little bit, but
yeah.
But there definitely seems to be an atmosphere, and we've talked about this on our show about sister wives, where, not necessarily lying, but not representing yourself authentically seems to be something, right? There's lies, everyone has these sort of family myths and lies, right? But it felt like one of the things with sister wives was they didn't, in some ways, I think they didn't even recognize how much they were lying to us. Right. Because I think that this is what their lives have always been. I mean, Christine being a great example of how she speaks about her childhood versus how her mom speaks about her childhood, and when Annie left the family, like what that was like. And, the way she describes it is very different than what it seems like the reality was.
And we were always taught to do that. Our kids, it's funny, one of our daughter's friends, she said, these guys are crazy. They hate each other with a smile on their face. Mm-hmm. And we were always taught that. I did not realize how dishonest I was. I didn't even realize, I always thought I was an integratable person until I started to leave. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't even know what the word integrity actually meant. And so because we were taught to cover things up, to be sweet, hide your true feelings, you're always in the refiner's fire. And so you're constantly, suppressing all the time. And so I don't think that it was a conscious, I'm going to lie or mislead. Mm-hmm. It's more of a suppression of emotion because we always want to do what's best for the family. We always want to make the family first. We always want to make the gospel first, religion first. That's what matters the most. And we don't want to misrepresent that. So put a smile on your face and get out there and show the world how wonderful this is. Mm-hmm. And it's just not true.
And if you tell your truth or how you're feeling or point out the discrepancies in their teachings and stuff like that, you're labeled rebellious. You're labeled. And then you get chastised over and over again about your rebellious nature and stuff like that to the point where you just shut up and try to live your life. A lot of times I just tried to live my life because I knew as soon as I turned 18, I could leave. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. And I know, Melanie, I've heard you say several times in your videos that it is a cult.
It is.
And I think, not all religions are cults, but, from your perspective, it is. Yeah. And so there's like all this mind control. Mm-hmm. And that's how they keep people there till they can't take it anymore. And
Well, and kids are very vulnerable, right? Because we know this, that kids need their parents' love and approval. That's survival. We have to be loved and accepted by our parents because that's how we're able to live. It's such an innate instinct. And this is why we see people who, even if their parents have abused them or if there's been issues, that there's this, desire to want to go back with their parents or have their parents' love and approval. So I can't imagine what it's like to, at 16, start to rebel, or not maybe start there, but you had been to really have different ideas because that's your survival. Absolutely.
And Cory makes himself sound like a rebel, but we were very good kids. We did what we were supposed to do. Mm-hmm. We really did.
I just asked questions.
We just asked a lot of questions, and that was considered rebellious. But we always tried to conform and do what we were supposed to do. I did. There was times where I did try to go against what my parents said, and I got smacked into line real quick. Mm-hmm. And so we were both, I would say we were the two that people would least expect to get up and publicly talk about things because we did fall in line. We did try to make our parents proud of us and happy. I mean, I literally didn't stand up to my dad till I was 26. It was the first time I told my dad no. And that was to date Cory. My dad had told me that I could not. Yeah.
It's like, excuse me? I'm 26.
At the time.
Yeah. And so I was 26 years old, and he told Cory, no, you stay away from her. She's going to take her 3 small children. My baby was 1. And she's going to marry somebody who already has an established family and wives that can just take care of her and her kids. I'm like, I don't want my life to just be taken care of. by someone else. I'm okay to do that on my own. So that was the first time and my dad was angry. He was furious at me. He's like, "What did you say to me, young lady?" When I told him no. I said, I'll date him if I want to date him. And so that was really like, he got aggressive, like he got big and aggressive at me. And I was terrified. I hadn't even lived in the home for 10 years and I was still felt that way. So deconstructing those types of beliefs that you are literally born with it's not an easy task to do. It's a lifetime task. No.
Yeah. Did you guys ever go to therapy, or like, how did you do deconstruct all of this?
Yeah.
So we really did. And then about 4 years ago, we started to do some plant medicine. So we've done ayahuasca, a couple of different things like that. I feel like that's prepared us to be able to speak about it publicly, because we knew we were going to get backlash from family members. We knew we were going to have people come back at us for that we love, and and our goal is not to hurt our family. And so we were trying to decide, how do we talk about this and not hurt the people that we love? And so I feel like some of those avenues of healing have helped us get to that point where we're solid in who we are. And so we can talk about what we've been through.
Do either of you, do you follow Brene Brown?
Yes, I love her.
Did you read Braving the Wilderness?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And that's both of you, it reminds me of that book, which is, and I recommend it to clients all the time. It's, it's an easy read too. It's like 175 pages, but it's very much about this idea of, what does it mean to go out on a limb? What does it mean to declare and go out on a limb and and how incredibly difficult and lonely it is to get out on that limb and do it on your own. Yeah. And it's very easy to look at someone when they've got a bunch of people behind them, but it all starts from that first moment of going out on that limb. And I can't imagine what it was like for both of you. It sounds like for the females, the next step in life is always marriage and children. For men, what was it? Either you're gonna get married and have children and have multiple wives, or you're out. You're out of the group. Is that it? Is there any other avenue to go besides getting married and having a bunch of kids? Is there any encouragement of going to college or starting a business or?
Yeah.
Not when we were growing up. No.
The interesting part. So when I grew up in Pinesdale, I was homeschooled. I graduated with packets. I was homeschooled. My younger siblings, because my dad was in the military, and so I didn't know that at the time, but any of his kids could go to college on the college. And so all of my younger siblings have gone and got their college degrees. I've got a lot of siblings that are very, very educated and in college, but us older ones I was never given that opportunity. I was never told. I had to be homeschooled. And then I was supposed to go out and work and get a career going. And then, yes, they offered marriage. And I was like, nope, I don't want to get married. If I get married, it's going to be to one wife that I love. And I was recommended that I get a wife, and I was like, absolutely not. So that I was rebellious on that I was only going to marry somebody that I loved and
not obligated to.
And so,
that takes a lot of courage too. Yeah.
Because a lot of people did marry. A lot of it's interesting. I would love to analyze polygamous marriages, because a lot of the people my age, the men my age that did get married, have all gone through divorces. And I'm not saying anything. I've been divorced. We were divorced also, and then got back together. So.
We got divorced. We were divorced for 2 years, and then we got back together.
That's a good story.
I would probably say divorce, probably in I think it's 50% here in America. I would honestly say in AUB, it's probably closer to
60.
Well, I'd say even higher,
Really?
75.
Wow.
Interesting.
Where they'll marry and then find out it's not going to work, and then they'll marry somebody else within the group or stuff like that. So
yeah, it's very true. Out of my dad's 8 wives, only 3 of them were originally married to him. The other 5 have been married to someone else previously. So divorce rate is very, very high in the AUB. I would agree with that. They just stay within, most of them just stay within the AUB, and then they just marry amongst themselves again.
Wow. Psych Legal Pop will be right back after these messages. Did you go to public school, Melanie, or were you homeschooled too?
I did. I went through public school most of the time, but my Cory's a little sick. Okay. I did go through public school most of the time, but because I was the oldest, I was pulled out of school a lot. So I was not very educated at all because my mom needed help, or I needed to be at home to help. I failed the 3rd grade completely because I got chicken pox. But then I was home a lot to help with the other babies. And so my mom got cancer when I was 10, and she had pretty severe cancer. So I missed a whole lot of school because of it. So not very educated person. Now that I'm older, I've educated myself, but I wasn't at the time. No. Oh.
So is there anyone, this might seem like a strange question, but is there anyone that you know that's happy? Like you feel like genuinely happy? Like what situation in all of this is, I would think maybe being the head, one of the apostles, are those people like happy and living their best lives? Is because it doesn't seem like this really works.
Yeah. No, I don't think the goal is to be happy. The goal is to be, you're in the refiner's fire all the time so that you can have a better life in the afterlife. So your goal is not to be happy. Your goal is to do the work of God. That's what your goal is.
That Puritan.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be miserable. It's those are what that's what they tell you. That's what defines that you're doing the work.
Yeah.
And you'll be happy in the afterlife. You'll have that bliss in the afterlife. So.
Yeah. Did you really believe that?
No, I didn't. But no. Obviously we didn't, because we were like, no, we don't want to do that. We want to, we want to live our best lives now. And I feel like we've taught that to our children, and we see the success in our children now. And we know we did a good job breaking them away from that because of their lives now and where they're at. And they've never had to experience anything close to what we did. And so, and they have the opportunities that our children have now are things they were impossible for us. And so I love to watch our children take those big, huge leaps and do those big, huge things that we're like, oh my gosh, that would never been in my realm of possibility if I hadn't broken away from it. So, and exposed myself to opportunity, just because you just don't have opportunity at all in the AUB. There's just really nothing. There's a select few that go to medical school, select few that go to, there's a dentist and a couple things like that. And those people are given opportunity. But not everyone has that opportunity, nor do they know that opportunity is even available.
Yeah.
And
because they're isolated, like on these compounds and stuff. Would you say that the membership of the church is going down, or remained pretty steady?
The last prophet was so controversial that they lost a huge amount of membership. I know that they did when he came into position. And so I'm not sure. I think they did lose quite a few members, but I think that they've been pulling a few members back in too. And so I've always been told the number's roughly around 10,000. And it's just always kind of been that way my whole life, because they have them from, members from Canada to Mexico, some in England. So it's very diverse in, geographical areas of where they cover. So there's a lot of, I would say that there's a lot more that do independent thinking than they ever have. So I would say that is definitely on the rise. But the membership, I think, is kind of wavered up and down here and there throughout the years, but I think they're still pretty strong.
Yeah.
So
on the show, we hear, I'm just thinking of Janelle and finite resources. So what is that what it felt like? Was it because we've seen this a lot on the show of just there's not enough money to go around because there's so many people and there's so many wives, and how do you do this? So did it feel that way when you were younger? Did it feel, or is it more of, no, people take on as many wives and children as they can financially take on?
Yeah. No, we were poor. We were so poor. Because we lived in the city. Like, I think Cory tells me about his upbringing, and I'm like, you guys were rich. You guys ate good food. Like, we didn't have food most of the time. We lived off potatoes. So
did we, but we grew up on a farm, and so we raised chickens, we raised turkeys. We had 13 acres we raised our food, put food storage away. So probably the best I've ever eaten in my life was when I was a kid, a youth, because we had just farm grown food. And then my dad and his first wife were both retired military. And then there was two other mothers that we called them grandmothers, but they both were professionals and had pensions. And so it wasn't like, we weren't rich, means were there, but we worked. I worked from a young age running the farm, which I wish my kids had done some of that, but my brother and I worked since the minute we could start working the farm, changing pipes, doing all that stuff. We worked from a very young age and got a good, and put in the food. So, so we always had food.
Was this issue of, because what we're seeing a lot of in this most recent season of Sister Wives is just about money and who gets the money and who doesn't, and who's in charge. So I'm assuming that it's always probably the father, the male, that's in charge. Is that very common does each household sort of split up money in different ways, or this sort of idea of like, does everyone get the same amount? Or I could imagine you probably saw too, people must have favorite wives. Some of these men must, right? And did you see a bit of like what's happening now?
You're using the term some.
Every single man has a wife.
I didn't want to assume.
Every family has a
favorite wife
like that.
Wow.
It's nothing. And it's funny to watch the episodes with our mothers, because they get so angry. And they're like, my mom is very, she's always been very straight laced, but you get her in front of an episode of Sister Wife and she's swearing at the TV. She's yelling, because it's just it's frustrating to watch that. But there is finance, especially this year with the finances season, because unfortunately that is what happens a lot of times, is that all the finances, you get one or two women who are like, yeah, we're all about the family. What can we give to the family? All of our financial resources go into the family. And then you've got the one who says, what can the family give me? And there's always one or two of those. And they literally milk dry the entire family funds. And it's disgusting to watch. And it happens all the time. And
in one of your videos, you talk about, you called it the entitled wife, and of course that immediately Robin came to mind. The way that you described, that she's not a contributor, she's in it for like, what can I get out of this? I got babysitters, I got, nannies, house cleaners, whatever. So that's a type of wife, right?
Go ahead.
And I assume those are always the favorite wives, because you couldn't get away with that unless you were the favorite, right? And it sounds like the men did not do a very good job of hiding it at all, of who was the favorite. And was that accepted? Like that, someone's always going to have a favorite, and that's just how it is.
The women fought against it, but what good does it do them?
Yeah.
And what's funny about that video that I made about wife types, we were driving when I made it. I was like, I think I'm going to make a video. I actually described my dad's wives. I didn't describe, and I wasn't even talking about the Browns. I was talking about all my dad's wives. I just went in order. And so
what are the other types? Other than the entitled wife?
Now you put me on the spot. You've got the professional or the worker wife.
Yeah.
You've got the ticket wife who she doesn't really even care if she's married to him. She just needs a man to get her into heaven because women can't get themselves into heaven. And so she just, my dad's last wife was that way. She only married him just to get herself into heaven. And then she passed away. And so he never even really had a relationship with her. And then you've got that entitled wife. And a lot of times some wives have 2 or 3 of these personalities, but then the first wife is always that one who holds the most control over the man, I think, emotionally, because she's his first intimate experience typically. And so if she crosses him, he's the meanest to her because he feels the most betrayed by her because, he gave her this part of himself and now she's betrayed that. So I'm trying to think what the other wives were.
The scripturally.
Oh, yeah. Because, sorry, you put me on the spot. So I'm like, the scriptural person. So one that knows the gospel. She knows how to live the gospel. She knows how to. Everybody else. Yeah, she's going to tell everyone else how to live the gospel. So I just kind of went in my dad's wives' order. I probably shouldn't say that because if they ever see this, they're going to be like, what?
Yeah, which one am I?
Yeah.
They know.
Oh, they know. They don't need to. Yeah, they don't need to be told. But yeah, it's interesting. And sometimes my dad had a favorite wife for a really long time. And then the new one came in and she was the cute one and the young one and everything. And she became the favorite wife. And now she's kind of maintained that position for the last 25, 30 years. She's maintained that position. And a couple of wives have tried to give her some good run for her money, but she knows how to, for some reason, take control over my dad again and get her own way. So it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch as an adult child. It was hard to experience as a child because a lot of times we suffered the consequences of those actions. We are the ones who got the lectures and the beatings and the whatever because we would see what would happen. Now as an adult, it's really hard to watch our parents go through things like that. I would tell my mom, get your name on something. Financially, get your name on something. Mom, when I went into real estate 25 years ago is when I started to realize the ramifications of that. We didn't know that. We were never taught anything like that. And so, and I would get this little pat on the head, like, you don't understand. We're doing what's best for the family. But what she didn't understand is if she's no longer a part of that family, she's not entitled to those resources.
Yeah. Do you think that because, I'm really shocked at how little, on the show, how Janelle and Mary, well, all of them, but especially Janelle, didn't protect themselves with any of this money stuff. And, I guess do you think that was her attitude because Mary seems to have the attitude, Cody would never screw me over that way. And I guess Janelle had the same attitude. Now she doesn't, but, it's really, considering how Janelle's so proud of herself for being the worker bee and, the financial person and this and that. It's well, not really, didn't protect yourself at all.
Because you're taught you trust this man.
He's the righteous head.
Yeah.
You're supposed, he would no longer be righteous if he became this person, and he's supposed to be the righteous head. And so then when he changes to who he is now, then they're like, dang it, we messed up. Yeah, you did. And your kids are telling you 20 years ago to get things in order so that if that ever happened, if he just wanted that one wife, that you would be protected too after putting everything into this family for 50 years.
But that's just so hard to even comprehend. So hard to even, because you're taught these are eternal families, these are eternal relationships. I never thought that I would ever get divorced. I remember going and buying items with my ex-husband and they're like, do you want to be on title? And I'm like, I don't think it matters. I didn't care. Fortunately, when we bought our first home, the loan officer that I used was a woman who insisted that I be on the title. I wasn't on the loan, but she insisted that I be on the title. And
good for her. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah. I was 19 years old. I had no idea.
Wow.
I had no clue. And so she really like walked me through I did the loan. My husband just showed up with the check, but I went through the whole loan process, and she made sure. And if she hadn't have, he would have sold that home out from underneath me. I would have had nothing when I got divorced. He literally liquidated all of our assets. He turned into Cody. Cody is who he is now is very common for these men when they get divorced. That's what they turn into. And my ex-husband I would say he's about 10 steps worse than Cody is. And he liquidated everything, and he couldn't liquidate the home. So that was the only thing that I got in the divorce. Because
Cody is really, he really is trying to screw them over, after all these years of talking about, the family, this and that. I mean, it's really, he's really changed. I mean, do you think that he feels, I don't know, like emasculated by all of this? Or do you think that he's relieved? Do you think he really is happy to just be with Robin? Or do you think that he still has that in him that, he was the man and these women should have stayed with him and served him and all of that?
Yeah, I definitely think Cory, probably I could let Cory answer that, because I definitely think he's emasculated by it. Honestly, it's something that, and I did a video on this recently. When you are in such a controlling religion that all your decisions are made for you, and then you leave that and you're left to your own devices, you find out who you really are. And we're seeing who Cody really is, because the wives no longer had a leader to run to tell on him, to put him in his place. And so I think that's one of the reasons why he has such an anger towards the leadership of the AUB, is because they were the people who would put him in his place when he misbehaved, and the wives could go tell on him.
Really? Does that happens? Like wives go and they complain about their husband, and then someone has a talking to?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Wow.
And so that was my first concern when I got divorced, or when I left the AUB at 22. I was in a panic. Who am I going to go tell to make my husband behave himself now? Because he doesn't behave himself. And so when we went back, I remember that sense of relief, like, okay, if he doesn't behave himself, now I can go tell the prophet, and the prophet can come and give him
re-educate him.
Re-educate. And so these men are left to their own devices and their own character when there's no one else to say, this is what you're supposed to do, or you're going to go to hell. When there's no one standing over them in a parental type situation or leadership type, relationship, these men we find out who these men really are. And that's sad. It's sad to see how Cody's turned out to be.
So do you think that that's what was happening with Mary and Christine, that, he wouldn't, especially with Mary, the whole thing about, waiting for her to leave, and you think someone was telling him, you need to stay with her, or because did she grow up in the AUB?
She did. Yeah, we were friends growing up.
Okay. So,
but is that common, what we saw with Mary, of someone just letting someone just hang on until they, and would it not be okay for Cody to turn to Mary 10 years ago and say, hey, this isn't working?
It would have been. He could leave whenever he can ask for a release whenever he wants to.
Okay.
That's a very, he misconstrues that on TV, in my opinion, is that he's absolutely allowed to ask for that release. But if they didn't have such a public show, then yes, I can name a dozen marriages right now where that's currently happening. And they're just hanging on because they can't get out of it. They don't know how to leave. They can't leave. And he's not going to kick them out, because then he's considered, it's one of the worst things that you can do next to adultery, next to murder, is abandonment. That's like the worst thing you can do.
And that's why Cody was so pissed when he got that phone call from the leadership saying you abandoned her, or that was the reason why the marriage ended. Yeah. The release happened was abandonment.
Yep. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And it's a hit to his ego. He is a priesthood holder that is supposed to have this, wives underneath of him, this kingdom that he's created. And he, at any time, in their belief system, you're only supposed to have sex to reproduce. And so at any time he could say, okay, we're not going to have children anymore. I don't have
to
be intimate with you.
I will go over here I'll just still be kind. I'll be the husband. You know what I mean?
But we've done our duty.
Wow.
Children.
You're just over here now. And so he was, again, I'm only speaking for what I saw growing up. I don't know what their situation was, but he was basically telling
Mary?
And Christine.
Oh, Christine.
Yeah.
Christine, hey, I'm not going to be intimate with you guys anymore. You can sit over here. We can still have family. We'll do family functions, but I'm going to be spending the time with my wife that is having kids and the young kids. And you're just kind of going to be set over here as a older mother that can help at times and everything. And Christine was like, nope, that's not happening. I'm out of here. And that's why he was so wounded. That's a knife in his kidney that he had suffered through this marriage.
With her being a terrible sister wife, just terrible.
Oh, yeah. And that's the interesting part, too. So
well, this is fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Because I just assumed it was just Cody, an a-hole. But it sounds like these are tenets of the religion that this is common. And what about the I never loved these women thing? Like, is that sort of part of the same kind of reasoning, or you have to love them at some point? I mean,
he loved them on a level of, hey, they're the mother of my children. Robin's his soulmate. She's the one that he deeply made this oath or covenant to.
Sacred
covenant.
Yeah.
Well, he made that to all 4 of the wives, but he didn't. He might have loved a certain way through it, but now he's found his soulmate, and they should just kind of appreciate that. And so probably what he meant to say is he never loved them to the level of Robin. He loved them as the mother of his children or what have you. And that's where
his tickets to heaven. Tickets to heaven.
They were all taught that they were expected to get married and create a family and create things. And it was going to be hard. It was going to be miserable. And now he found the love of his life. And so they should just accept that. So.
But Cody, as we all know, right, he went off to a mission, and then he comes back from the mission and finds out his family's converted. So for someone like him, right, he's kind of interesting because he was raised LDS, and then now the family's converted, and then he marries Mary, and he goes into the deep end. So do you see a difference between how Cody is because he was raised on both sides, because he wasn't in the AUB, versus someone else who bred AUB? Or is Cody acting exactly like how any of these husbands would act, whether he was raised in it or not?
A little kinder. That says a lot, because Cody might be a little kinder during this whole process than some of the other men are. And we see how kind he is. So that would be the only thing I would say. I met the first day Cody ever came into the AUB, I met him that day. And everybody thought he was so amazing and such a, charismatic, such a nice, fun guy. And he married these women out of obligation to some degree. And when you're when you're in the situation, you think you have choice. We always say that I'm at choice. I can choose to come. I can choose to leave. I can choose who I marry. You think you are. And with the limited amount of knowledge that you have and exposure that you have, you really fully believe that you're at choice. I fully believed I was at choice when I got married 8 days into 17. And yet now that I'm away from it and I can see things, I was not at choice.
Expectation. You were an expectation.
And so
you
that's
were expected to.
Yeah. So I think Cody has a level of resentment because he went into these relationships with the expectations this is what he was supposed to do. And he was going to love them as much as he genuinely knew how to at that time. And now that he has someone else that he goes, oh, this is what real love is. I didn't know that for the last 20 years. Now this is what I truly want, not this. And now he's angry and he's resentful that he ever got into obligatory relationships in the first place. And that's just what
that makes complete sense with what he's saying. Because when he's saying all this stuff, we're just going, huh? What?
Yeah.
Because
you have been on TV for 15 years, right? We have been watching you.
He's been trying to convince himself, you know, I think more than anything. And I was watching a video, Melanie, that you said that when he came back from his mission, he had kind of lost this sense of self, and that the joining the AUB sort of gave him a purpose, because his decisions were kind of being made for him. He was being told, you know, do these things. And that's why he got so angry, I think, when his children started getting older and they wouldn't do what he told them to do. And they were all just like, no. And that's why he was so mad. And then Robin is feeding into this, feeding it all, you know, she's stoking the fire. And I think you said that Robin is really the leader of the family.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cory's smirking.
You guys said that.
I'm sorry, but she absolutely is. My dad has one wife who absolutely is. She controls what happens in the family. And he'll make an agreement with my mom, and then he'll go get his real opinion. And then he'll come back and he'll say, well, we're not going to do that. I've worked something else out or whatever. My mom's like, what are you talking about? This is what we agreed upon. And so that's what happens. And she's very sly the way that she does it. She asks a lot of questions, leading questions that lead him to a different answer than what he already had given. Are you sure that the boys are being safe with COVID? Are you sure that, you know, is that really what you want? Are you sure that's what you really want? And so she does leading questions that cause doubt. And that's where you lose yourself. And so when you constantly live in a state of doubt all the time, I mean, I know that we're always curious, but curiosity and doubt are two totally different. You know, it's one thing to be curious about an answer. It's another thing to be doubtful of yourself when you're making a decision. Totally.
Because he's being manipulated. And and speaking of Robin, so Cory, you grew up on the same street as Robin, and you were best friends with her brother, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much contact you had with her, or I don't know if there's any, not to like gossip about her, but I mean, like, just what do you know about her? Like, what was she like?
So when we were little kids, we moved from Salt Lake, Murray up to Pinesdale. And when people were moving into Pinesdale, the priesthood property, they had a trailer court there, and just a bunch of trailers all in this trailer court. And you would usually, when you're coming up on the property, live in the trailer court while you're building your home. And so our family, 3 wives and 8 children, and my dad lived in a 2-bedroom trailer. Oh
my gosh.
While the house was being built. And they were, I was my best friend in that trailer court, was my friend, and her family, her biological father and mother, lived in that trailer court also. So, but I'm quite a bit, I don't know how much older, but I knew her mother and her dad more than I knew her. I knew her when they're running.
She was just
they're just
little girl. Yeah.
But I was friends with my best friend, and her mother ended up, once her biological dad got another wife. So now he had 2 wives living in 2 different trailers there. She got a release from him and married my friend's dad.
So Robin's mom left. So he knew her when she was with her biological father. And then his best friend was Robin's stepdad's son. So that's kind of that. So
Robin didn't really, live polygamy, right? Because if her parents basically split up after he took a second wife, right? I always thought she said her mom was the second wife.
Yeah, so then her mom married
the second wife to
to the stepfather.
Friend's dad.
Yes.
Is that the one we saw on the show?
Yeah.
That was there when
during the birth
and all that. Okay.
Yeah, that's not normal. That's not.
That was my next question.
I know absolutely no one who has ever done that. That's not, I was stunned when I saw that. My mom was stunned when she saw it. She was like, what in the heck? So that's not something that is regular occurrence.
Yeah, and they did the same thing like when Maddie had her first baby, and I was just like, what is going on here? All these people.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, so Robin perplexes me because she's brilliant. She's not like education wise, some of the things she says, you're kind of like, but it seems to me that this woman was in it for the long con. Like she played the long game, because you can see in those early seasons, she very intentionally did. And you can see it on one level being like, what a kind person, what a kind wife. But you're like, hold on a second here. This is in direct contrast to these other women. And the reality is, I've been married 21 years now. The reality is, you guys have been married a long time, like anyone you've been married to a long time, it's like, oh God, you again. Someone new is always exciting, right? Anyone new that comes in. So I can understand that initial excitement, but it sounds like she really thought through, what does this man want?
Yeah.
Like, what does he want? What kind of wife does he want? And how do I fit myself into that category? And so that's why when they talk about being soulmates, I'm always a little skeptical. I'm like, but do you even know each other? Are these are either of you real in
with each other?
With each other? If from day one, she has been, right, as opposed to the other wives who've just kind of been, living their lives, and right, your husband comes home, yeah, great, hi, how nice to see you, bye. And then versus her who everything stopped when Cody came over, it sounds like, and everything was focused on him.
Right.
Is that, do you see that a lot where someone comes in and kind of gets the person's number real quickly and like molds themselves to being that person?
Yeah. My dad's favorite wife that's kind of controlled and ruled our family for the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. She did that very much. So she'd already been married a few times before she married my dad. And so, and she came in with 3 little kids, and but she did that at the expense of her children. And so her children were extremely neglected and abused because everything stopped when, dad came home. And so she catered to his every need. And what's interesting is I can always tell who my dad's talking to on the phone based on the tone of his voice. And he would talk to her in a very childlike, like very, I'm like, who are you talking to? Is she like 3? And so, yeah. And that's how we would talk to her. And so, because that was her emotional capacity, probably. And so I think that's really, these women, we were trained to really, honestly, I grew up going, I hate women. We were literally trained to not love other women because they were always going to come in and steal what was yours. They were always going to come in and abuse you and use you and discard you. And so they want to talk about this beautiful sister-wife relationship, which I quite frankly think is bullshit.
And that's good for the cameras.
And that,
But behind the scenes, there's always conflict.
Do you think that was the issue with Mary and Janelle?
Yes.
Because Janelle did not grow up in this. Yeah. She converted. She just converted. And Mary was coming from that mentality of this woman's coming in to try to take something from me. And then she has a child right away and all that. So that makes sense.
And that's what's so frustrating for these women is because Janelle came in going, oh my gosh, we're going to make this whole, in my assumptions, just based on what I've seen, we're going to make this whole family. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be wonderful. And Mary looked at her instantly as she's a threat. She's going to take what's mine. She's going to do all of these different things. And it's funny because my mom was converted and Cory's mom was converted in. And it's interesting because, my dad's favorite wife for the longest time, she was raised in it. And so she knew all the right answers. My mom knew nothing. But my mom came into it going, I want the betterment of the family. I want what do we all have to do to be cohesive and grow and learn together? Where this, this other wife was like terror. She terrorized the family for a long time. And yet nobody knew that. But then when my mom would get sick of it, she would leave. And my dad came to her and he's like, you need to get your attitude together. You need to fix this because people are going to think this is my fault and her fault when you're the problem. And so there's a lot of that stuff going on. So I'm sure Janelle got one or a dozen talkings to like, you need to conform because you're going to be the problem if you don't. And then you've got, there's so many different layers of dynamics with so many of the different personalities. But yeah, Mary, I'm friends with a lot of Mary's siblings from other families. And, Mary's mom was the favorite wife. She just was. Mary learned from her mom. And, and then Robin comes in and tries to take that over. And I'll bet those two women never speak to each other again. There's no point in it. There's no reason to. So.
Do you think Mary was before Robin came into the family? Do you get a sense do you think Mary was the favorite? Because it seemed before Robin showed up that things felt very equal in that way.
Well,
but maybe not.
No,
I wouldn't say. I don't know. Growing up in our family, there was a point where everybody was trying to be cohesive. And I'm just getting this from my mother, talking to my mother, where they're trying to be cohesive. So she called it more along the lines of a squeaky wheel. Somebody would be wanting more, nagging or whatever it was. And so they were trying to work together as a family. He was trying to run this family, but then that favorite wife comes in and tends to more control it. So I wouldn't know if I didn't get to really see their back life, just the beginning as this fourth wife's coming on.
But they seemed happy. I thought, they seemed. Excuse me.
What do we know now?
Yeah, I don't know. But they seem. But like they would kiss and hug and smile, and
that's what he's supposed to do. That's what.
So maybe that was just an act. Maybe it was just for the camera. I don't know.
I don't think it was an act so much as it was just what they knew at the time. They knew.
That's how we grew up. That's what
we saw.
Affection was to us. Nothing ever went deeper.
Yeah.
And to me, growing up as a kid, that is what it looked like.
What you aspired to have as a relationship. Yeah. So I wouldn't say Mary was the favorite wife. I'd say Mary was the squeaky wheel. And so that's why she got more of the attention.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was a favorite wife until Robin came in. Mary just was the squeakier wheel. So she got more.
Well, she was the legal.
She got more stuff. Bigger house. And
right.
Yeah.
So. Right.
Psych Legal Pop will be back after these messages.
I have so many questions.
I know. We've kept you for.
We've kept you way past the time, but I have like 17 other questions.
I could sit here and ask questions for 8 hours.
They all lived inside the same house when they first started. So
yes.
They were actually all three living as what they would consider in the AUB sister wives. And Robin never lived with any of them.
Yes.
Always had her own
separate.
So that's why when Christine goes, okay, now I've had a taste of living separate from, I'm not going back to the house thing. That's no more. That won't happen. Where Robin has never lived that way, but she's aspiring. I want one big house without bull crap. You do not.
Well, one little side tidbit that you might not know is when Cody married Mary, he actually went and spent their honeymoon at Cory's house in Montana. So that they could see what a cohesive family that lived all together with all the wives,
what we were supposed to look like. And then we all had to be on, I wasn't there, but they all had to be on the best behavior to show other people coming in. So not that we were on TV, but we looked like we were on TV. None of the wives fought, anything like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what was the connection? How someone just, did you know them at all?
Well, Cody's dad and Cory's dad were really good friends.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the younger siblings, Cory's younger siblings, went to the ranch in Wyoming. So,
okay.
Yeah. And so and Cody, because he knew nothing about polygamy, he hadn't been born and raised in it. He, when he married Mary and they decided they were going to build their family together, that's when they packed up and went to Montana. His mom was saying they were gone for most of the day doing activities or whatever, but then they'd come back at night and see how the family would eat dinner together or what they would do. And, to see how a cohesive polygamous family, although,
so they could try to create it.
Yeah. Although Cory's got some stories that I'm like, his moms almost killed each other numerous times. People literally had to physically come in and remove. So it's just put on your best face, make it look like, no, we all love each other. Look how well we do dinner together every night, or we do whatever. And then really behind the
cameras are off.
The cameras
are gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was
with 39 kids or whatever. It's like, there's no way that it's going to be just peace and love all the time.
And if you're always bringing in, because it sounds like there's always this bringing in new wives, having more kids, bringing in new wives, it's this constant chaos, right? It sounds like there were times where there was a good equilibrium. Things were working well. Like, we're good just like this. And I think maybe that's what we saw with the Browns for a long, right? Like this combination like this is good enough. I mean, again, we don't know what was going on behind the scenes. But if you're constantly adding in new ingredients, it's your life does become or feels like a constant, it's a new year and it's a whole new setup or new people or new things to deal with. I'm very curious when for both of you, but especially you, Melanie, when you left the church, this idea of, it sounds like you have an image of what you show in the church. It sounds like it teaches you, right? Outwardly, you are kind and nice, and this is how you present yourself. And you should be feeling this way inside, but we all know that you can't. It's not natural. It's not how we operate. So what was it like for you when you just started like meeting other new women? Were you sort of like, kind of like, get competitive with new women? Or was it like, you know what I mean? Just how do you make that shift in your mind of, wait, I can authentically tell you what I'm feeling. That is the truth. And I'm safe to do that.
I would say that I just turned 50 this year, and I don't think I'm there completely, to be totally honest. That's something that I'll have to work on for a long time. And so, and I was very competitive by nature. I'm 6'2". I'm very tall. I was very competitive by nature with the boys. I've always had men, like boys have always been more friends with me. I've always gotten along. I don't get along with girls I would say that, he calls me the most sexist person he knows. And I would say that's something that I've really struggled with. And I have 2 daughters, and I didn't want them to struggle with it at the level that I had struggled with it. And unfortunately, a lot of that subconsciousness has trickled down to my girls, and they don't have as many girlfriends either, because women were just unsafe. They just, they have always been unsafe. And I hate using that word in the context of polygamy now, because I feel like the Browns have ruined that word. But it's true. And so I'm 50 years old. I don't think I found that quite yet, to be honest. It is something that I work on regularly. I feel safe with my own sisters to some degree. My mom had 7 girls, and my dad, out of the kids, my dad had 13 girls total. And so it's something that I've really struggled with for sure. So yeah.
And what about do you remember the time in which you told someone how you really felt in that moment and they accepted it? I mean, I can't imagine, because it sounds like every time you share what you really are thinking growing up, it was, right, you get a lecture or worse.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious of, like, for both of you, that moment in time where you're like, oh, wow, I said the truth, and they're not freaked out, or they're not angry, or they're not hurting me.
Gosh, that'd probably be when you and I were together, is what I would say. I don't remember a time in my life where I felt that way before Cory and I got together.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I guess when I told my dad no, that I would be dating Cory, and but I thought he was going to physically, like he got aggressive.
So what's the question again? Sorry, is it us?
I guess I'm just curious if you have any awareness or memories of those times when you were saying what the truth was to you, because it just sounds like you grow up with this idea of, okay, there's only one right answer, all the time for all of these things, but you are feeling something inside, right? This disconnect. And it sounds like the two of you very much were aware of, like, there's something, even though outwardly people are telling me this one thing, I know inside of myself that this isn't quite right. I'm just curious. I just think about some of these things of, I just think about my own life and the way in which Brooke and I grew up, which is like this very Northern California our parents say they're not hippies. They're not. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was very, we lived in an environment where we could share what we thought with our parents, that we could say that. So I innately, taught that to my son, and Brooke taught that to her daughter, and we grew, and so when I got into the workplace, it wasn't scary to say to somebody, hey, I don't want, set a boundary, or I don't want to do that or whatever. So I'm just so curious if what that's like when you leave all of that and you're like, oh, wait a second, the world is so different. Like, I can be myself.
Right.
And that's okay. And I'm okay.
Yeah.
So growing up.
Maybe that's not a question.
No, that's
I just find it fascinating, right? That I can't imagine what that's like when you enter into a world that's so radically different, very different than what you're taught.
Yeah.
Of what that's like when, like, the first work experience you had where you felt like, I got to stand up to this person, and, not even, and that they heard me and they accepted and they apologized.
Right.
What that's like, of like, oh, wow. Okay. This could be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had an older brother, and he's 14 years older than me. And I felt like as a kid, I could be honest with him. I could talk to him. Also, my siblings, my younger siblings, those people were safe that I could have those conversations with of how I actually felt. I didn't feel like I could take that to my parents because I would be told, no, you're wrong, or I'd be disciplined. But my older brother really was a place where I could ask him questions. There was honesty there. And it was when and then as I started doing that, I would ask my dad questions. He'd get frustrated, but when he was suggesting that I do certain things, I'd be like, I'm not. I refuse to go. I refuse to get married. I refuse to go through your guys' temple. There's things that I don't agree with at all, and so I refuse to do that. And he was disappointed in me, but he's like, I think he had the attitude that I'd come back, that I just needed to grow up more and I'd come back. And so, and I had some powerful women in my life. I have a grandmother and two aunts that
were not a part of
and a grandfather, and those were people that I could be honest with too and have a conversation. So I felt like that I was kind of, and then it was later on in life that I could have that honest conversation with my dad. We didn't always agree. And I feel like that I have those conversations with my mother now too. We don't always agree.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
It was hard growing up when it was a difficult. I can't even.
Well, and you sound. It sounds like, Cory, you're very introverted.
Yeah.
And so, because my son is the ultimate introvert, and I think about, okay, I watch the Browns, I'm like, my kid, and I think about that, right? Like, not every kid, like, there's some kids where they're born in that family and that it works for them. It's their personality and they like it and they like all that. But there are, you don't know what kind of kid you're going to get until they come out. And my husband and I are both very extroverted, and we get this very introverted kid that's like got a lot of anxiety. And so, I often think about and I feel for whatever that kid is in that family that is like this doesn't work for them. And there is no way to even really give you the space that you need, or this awareness that they could, or you should, or, all of those things. And I can't imagine how hard that is, because I see my son and just how hard lots of, the social interactions and all this stuff, but we give him, he's an only child, but he has a tremendous amount of space to recharge and to feel right, to have that time for himself.
There was no space like that in the.
That must have been so hard.
Yeah,
so hard.
And there was zero space. I probably when I was an infant, but my younger brother is 18 months younger than me, and we shared a room our whole lives. So I would escape. I loved reading books. I'd escape, but there's no place to escape to. And with 9 women, and if you weren't working, you were in trouble. Even if I was, I need time to go here, so I need time to get away. But I felt like I grew up on eggshells all the time. And so we have a son. He likes to go to his room and have that peace and quiet, and I understand it. When we have family come over, it's overwhelming. So there's even, she'll be like, there's family out there, and I'm in there.
Like, I'll be right there.
Yeah.
I'll be back out.
Well, we're both the oldest, and we'll get parties here, and we'll have 50 people. And that's very common, minimum of 50 people or whatever. And everyone will be like, where's Cory? And I'll walk in there, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm just taking a minute. I'll be right out. And at first I used to get really frustrated. I'm like, that's your family out there. What are you doing? And so now that we're getting, now that we understand each other a little bit more, now I'm like, okay, go take 10 minutes in the bedroom and then come back out when you're ready.
I open up when certain parts of my brothers, when they come in, it's great. We can sit and talk and have fun and stuff like that. But
So would you always say, I'm going to work on the fence way out here, right? Like if you always have to be working, I would take a book and a hammer, be like, I'm going to work on the fence.
I'm working over here.
And just like, if anyone walks by, just bang the hammer a bunch of times.
Yeah.
That is Cory
that's
to a
me.
T.
I'm always petering on something out in my garage, in the yard, doing something where it's just where the world can calm down and be quiet for a minute. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's very special that you guys ended up together, because you have this shared experience and you can understand the other person better. It's just, and obviously, you guys work together, you're very comfortable together. So that's just really nice to see. And
it sounds like you met each other. Sorry. It sounds like you met each other at the right time. Right. Because it sounds like if you had met each other when you were 17, 18, it wouldn't have worked. Like it was almost like the two of you met each other at the perfect time
I wouldn't have given
to allow
the time of day.
The time of day.
I wouldn't have.
Cool.
And that's the other thing about life that's fascinating is how, it's that Steve Jobs quote, you can only connect the dots looking back. But, all these things happen to you. And then you realize like, oh, that's right. I could not have met this person then. I needed to go through these things in order to be able to meet this person now. And now it all makes sense.
Right. Well, it's funny. My ex-husband grew up down the street from Cory. And so, I was in Montana all the time. We always were around each other. We always saw each other, and then Cory dated his little sister for a long time. And so it's like we saw each other all the time, but we just never connected. And then it wasn't until, but the first time I did see Cory, it was on that houseboat in Lake Powell, and I was sitting on the couch and he comes walking in, and I literally saw like this wave of energy come at me. And I was like, oh my gosh, who is this? And that's the first time I actually saw him, having met him half a dozen times before that, but I just never bothered to look at him. And so, but I was a mom raising little kids, and then he came onto our houseboat and was wonderful with my children, and my children adored him. And I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time, and they just absolutely adored him. And so then when we decided to date, I had a 1-year-old when I got divorced, and I had a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And when we decided to date, I asked Cory, we were dating for a while, and he's sitting on the floor playing with my, at the time, 2-year-old. And I was like, life doesn't get any better than this. This is exactly what I want, is a man who's involved with my children and cares about what's happening with my children. And I was so worried about that evil stepfather scenario. And so then I'm watching him play on the floor with my little 2-year-old, and I'm like, do you want to get married? And he's like, absolutely. Well, let's do it then. And so that's how we ended up getting married when my baby was, he was about 2 months away from being 3.
Wow.
But yeah. So we didn't see each other. And now, and then we ended up getting married. We were married for, 15 years. And then we got divorced for 2 years. And then it's kind of one of those situations where we were able to find our way back to each other, where we were just like, you don't know how good you have it until it's gone. And fortunately, we were able to be as respectful as we could during that whole divorce process. The kids always came first in a lot of things. And so we were able to find our way back to each other in that. And now I feel like we've learned to see each other at a level that we never even knew was possible in our first marriage. And he tells me all the time, I love this second marriage way better than the first marriage.
Well, and I think married couples, this idea, this is why there's so much divorce, is it's hard. It's hard over length of time, like the spark, that initial, whatever excitement. You've heard all their stories. You can't stand the way they choose sometimes, all of those things. And I do think that it's, I think having a long distance relationship is hard long term, but I do think it's good for people to get away for a while and have marriage vacations or whatever it is, so that you can go and, do other things and have other experiences. If there was enough there, you're going to come back together.
Yeah.
With that there, but it is, I think a lot, it's interesting just in my work, how many people realize afterwards, like, God, I shouldn't have divorced that. Like, we should have just kind of like pushed through or found some other solution or something like that, because it's a choice. You wake up every day and you're like, do I choose to love this person or be annoyed by them?
Right.
And which one I choose is kind of like how it's going to be.
Right.
And am I going to choose to be responsible for myself, or am I going to blame them for everything?
Right.
All of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's an amazing story.
It is. I feel bad taking up any more of especially Cory's time, since
we're taking our grandbabies to see Christmas lights tonight. And I'd forgotten that was on the same day. So we we have at least another 20 minutes or so before we have to get ready, but whenever you guys are ready. So yeah.
Well, I'm very curious about Mary. These are all the notes that I had to write down so I didn't forget. I'm very curious about Mary and Mary not being able to have a lot of children. What happens? Because we've talked about this on the show around what must be like for Mary in this environment where you grow up and, having children is your most valuable skill. I'm sure, though, you must have seen women that couldn't. Not all women can. So there must have been. And so are those women seen in a different way?
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah,
okay.
Unfortunately, there are. And, my mom owned a health food store here locally. And so people from all walks of polygamy, all different groups, FLDS mostly, the Kingston group, all of these different polygamous groups would come into her store to try to find ways if they were infertile and couldn't have babies. How could they, a polygamous family can't do IVF. That's so out of their reach. Any sort of medical assisted births, they can't afford to do that. And so the women that would come in there and the stories that I would hear are horrific. They are, and my mom would do her best with everything that she had available. And it resulted into some women having children one woman went 10 years and never could have a child. And then all of a sudden she had 5. And so not to say that, I'm not trying to promote holistic stuff like that, but I'm just saying there was ways that they could do things that they just didn't know about before. And so she would tell me some of the stories. I even sat in on a couple of the stories of the way that these women are treated if they're not allowed. One woman I remember particularly, she was from the FLDS, and her sister wife had told her that she must have been an eyesore to God in the pre-existent, and that's why God punished her so that she couldn't have children. And so it's very much seen as, what did you do wrong that God won't give you a child? What did you do wrong? What are you currently doing wrong? What did you do wrong in the pre-existence for God not to bless you to be a mother? And so it is very, and it's unfortunate, because I know a lot of women that come from the AUB that aren't able to have children, or only able to have one or two. And it's tragic to see the shame and the guilt that's placed on these women because of something that is out of their control. But it's very, this is where I relate to, like, the way back in the day, the witchcrafty days, like, oh, you did something, you pissed off the gods, and so now you can't have children. It's very much, if that's where the AUB takes a step back in time, for sure.
And it's not necessarily said out loud. It can be just implied. It's just implied. It's those snarky little things that they'll say to each other.
Yeah.
So
Mary, we don't know Mary before the show, but I would think that a lot of Mary's anger, a lot of the things that maybe we're seeing, is this wrestling with her own disappointment, because it sounds like she wanted to have a lot of children. It was like her own personal disappointment, but also on top of that, the fact that she must feel all this disappointment by all these people around her, even if maybe they're not saying it directly. I do wonder if that contributes to a lot of sort of what we're, the Mary that's, and she's evolving, she's worthing up, but she's, but that, that she, kind of angry person. Maybe this is when she made a stand, maybe maybe that anger made her dig in and be the squeaky wheel. I don't know. I don't know exactly, but, I can imagine, I cannot imagine for Mary seeing like Janelle getting pregnant and then Christine gets pregnant. All of it.
Yeah.
How hard that must be.
Yeah. It's got to be a big slap in the face every time another wife ends up pregnant.
Yeah.
Got it. When Robin offered to be a surrogate for Mary, I was really disgusted by that scene. I didn't think that it was genuine by any means at all. Mary was 42. Like, she is not, she doesn't want to start her family over. That was a whole made for TV section of that show, for sure. She's over here like, I'm about to have a kid go to college. I don't want to start over. And so, that, I talk about that, Robin being one of Robin's long games. I'm going to offer you this, and I know you're not going to take me up on it, but eventually you're going to have to offer me this in the future, because I did this for you. Even though I knew you wouldn't do it.
Like the divorce.
Right.
The divorce.
Well, and that's exactly what I said in one of our videos, is that then when the divorce situation came up, it was like, remember when I was going to give you a child? Well, now you can give my children a father.
Yeah.
And so this is why I have trust issues with women, because it's very manipulative like that. There's a, I know you'll never use this offer, but I'm going to give it to you. And do I think Robin was genuine in that moment? Absolutely. She was flooded with dopamine from just having a baby.
Yeah.
And so she had all this love in her heart, and she very much meant it. But I almost guarantee you 30 minutes later, when that dopamine rush comes off, that goes, oh shit, what did I just do? What did I just offer? And so, those are some of the tactics that you'll see. And unfortunately, women in Mary's position that can't have children will fall for these tactics so much easier, because they want to be accepted. They want to belong. It's a natural instinct to want to belong.
They want to mother those children.
Right.
And that mother has control.
Yeah.
Has control over how much she gets to see those other children.
Right. And so unfortunately, women who can't have children or have a lot of children are very abused in polygamy, very abused, very manipulated. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they did kind of, they played up this thing with, that Mary had this special relationship with Robin's kids. But then, there were scenes where she wanted to spend time with them and Robin said no.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I think so much of that was just made up and trying to make, Robin look magnanimous. And I think that surrogacy offer was totally planned and she had no intention of doing it. And
it's a level of control too, to dangle those kids
Yeah.
opportunity. and to take that away.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunity. If you're doing this, or if you followed these rules, then you can, if you created a safe space, then you can do this. So
then you can hang out with my children. But until then, yeah, it's a very manipulative. That's why I say in a lot of my videos, I know a lot of women who have the same energy type that Robin has, because it's a very manipulative energy. And she probably doesn't even realize the level of her manipulation, because it's what she grew up with. It's what she saw. I mean, my sisters and I are always trying to correct each other. You know, love my mom to death. She might listen to this one day. She listens to most everything we do, 99% of it. But she was the worst guilt tripper ever. Nothing ever came out of that woman's mouth that didn't have a guilt trip associated with it. And so one of the things that we girls do with each other is we'll catch each other. Hey, that sounded just like something mom would have said. Or, you know, do I need to pack a bag? Am I about to go on a guilt trip? And so we'll catch each other all the time. Yeah.
I haven't heard that one before. I'm going to use that again.
Yeah, we're always saying that. Pack your bags. Yeah. And so a lot of times, but we don't see it in each other, or I don't always see it in myself, because
it's just something we're trained with. We grew up seeing all the time, and then all of a sudden, whoa, sorry, that was, I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a normal reaction when there's scarcity, you know, because there's scarcity of time, resources, everything. So yeah, you have to get what you can get, you know.
Right.
But yeah, it feels like your whole life is just about lack. Like it's just not enough, you know, you're always lacking, and it's very hard to, you know, if I'm not talking, you know, I'm not going to get into like manifesting or anything. That's a whole other ball of wax. But there is this concept or this idea of how do you think about your life?
Right.
And if your life is all about lack, it's not enough, because it isn't enough. It isn't like, you know, you're that it isn't true. It's hard to ever feel like you have enough, and to ever feel a calm and a peace. And Cory, when you said walking on eggshells, I hear this a lot from clients who grow up in families where they have parents who are addicts, or mental illness, or anything like that. And with kids, you know, kids need schedules. Kids need to know that this is how it's going to be. This is what it is. And that what ultimately happens is you grow up and you realize, like, oh my God, this pit in my stomach shouldn't be here.
Right.
You know, that evolution of realizing, like, oh, wow, yeah, every day I was worried or scared or off balance in some way, shape, or form.
Well, right.
And so that's what I was just very curious about, like, when you're sort of in that evolution, when you start therapy, of just like, whoa, you know, wow.
Well, I feel like our nervous systems growing up were always in fight or flight. Always. And we didn't learn how to calm ourselves and heal our nervous system so that we could even see something different. And so we didn't even know that there was other opportunities available for us to be happy, or to be calm, or to be anything, because our nervous systems were so hard, you know. And so now that's one of the biggest things we've tried to gift our children is, hey, you don't live in fight or flight. Your nervous system can relax. You can calm down. You can be here. And so we tried to create that with our children, knowing full well, you know. And it's funny, we've had a lot of kids come live in and out of our house. We've housed a lot of, like, you know, foreign exchange students, that kind of stuff. And so it's just funny. They will leave and they'll say that to us. That's one of the biggest things that I learned living in your home, is my nervous system calmed down. And so I'm so appreciative of that, because that has been one of our goals as parents, is to create that environment where our children are functioning from, you know, a desire to live life, not a fight or flight moment all the time. So their nervous system is constantly in desire to achieve a goal, or to find something, you know. It's that passion and love for life, not that fear of life. And I think that's the biggest gift we've probably consciously given to our kids.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, you're breaking the cycle,
right?
You know, you're breaking the cycle. And one of the things about being a therapist that I enjoy the most is when I'm able to work with someone and I'm able to see, right, because they grew up in a certain environment, or, you know, they've had this certain relationship with their parents, and just seeing this evolution of watching them realize, like, oh my God, my life could be so much better. Oh my, you know, of what it could be. And And then they always fear, I'm going to pass, what if I pass this along to my kids? And this is the piece of it, is like being able to say, no, you won't. You won't.
Right.
Because now you know,
Right.
like you are changing things for everyone behind, after you.
Right.
This is how these things really evolve and change. And so your children will evolve even more. You know what I mean? That's like what that looks like. I mean, that's the goal, right? To do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. Well, we are going to wrap this up.
Yeah,
we could go on and on forever, but I so want to thank you for coming on. I hope you can come back and we can.
I want to recap Sister Wives. I want to recap an episode with you too.
Okay.
If you're willing to come back.
Yes. That would be so much fun. And I thank you so much just for your honesty and willingness to talk about your lives. Your lives are fascinating. And you guys, again, I think it's so great that you're together and you're doing so well and you have broken the cycle. It's just, it's very inspiring.
Thank you.
So I want you to plug everything. I think you said you had a podcast also in addition to your YouTube channel?
Well, the YouTube channel is where I processed or posted my podcast at the very beginning.
Okay.
And then we just kind of got wrapped up in doing lives, but we're actually going to go back to a podcast style, more of a podcast style. The lives kind of took off for the last 6 weeks. And so that's what we were doing.
Yeah. Because the season. Yeah.
Well, you guys must get tons of questions.
Oh,
tons.
I think on one of our lives, we had 1,400 questions. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we do get a lot and we love answering them. This is something we can talk about all day, every day. But we definitely want to do this more pod style. So it will be on our YouTube channel. We'll be doing more sit down where we do, more of the podcast style instead of the quick Q&As.
Yeah. And so we'll put this in the show notes, but it's Notes to Self 444 on YouTube and also on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
And we'll have to have you back to talk about an episode or just talk about this season. And it's a good season. Lots happening.
Yeah, we'd love to. We'd love to.
I'd love to.
Yeah, you had mentioned
this one.
You had mentioned earlier about manifestation. So that's why I picked Notes to Self, is because they were the notes that I made to myself growing up of what person I wanted to be or how I wanted to, I'd watch one woman treat another woman a certain way and I didn't want to be that type. So I would literally make physical notes all over and post them. And then 444 is for transformation or manifestation. So that's why I picked those numbers as well.
Yeah, I had a feeling because I I'm a little woo-woo in my own way, but, I grew up primarily in Berkeley, California. So, but I'm always fascinated by the numbers and why we see certain numbers. And there's times where you'll see 1111 and 111 a lot. Like every time you look up, you're like, how does this happen every time? So I'm always fascinated by that. And I think there's so much misinformation about what exactly manifestation is. What does that mean? People think that you just kind of like think about a car and it's going to show up, but it's really about, what you're talking about. It's like, how do I want to live? How do I want to feel every day? And what choices do I make when I feel that? Doesn't mean that you're not feeling your feelings or that you're denying your feelings, but that you have control over you and how you decide to show up every day.
Yep. You make a conscious choice of what kind of self you want to create. And so,
which is about, this is what I always teach my clients, which is, because I'll talk to parents and parents will come to me and say, well, I want my kid to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but they have to figure that out. I work with a lot of young people. They have to figure that out. They have to figure out what is the right combination, whether it's a person or a job or the city or whatever that works for them. And that is so unique to each of us.
Right.
So unique.
Right.
So this idea of there's only, when you grow up in this religion where there's only one way to be or one way to think, or there's only one, I can't imagine what it's like to have all these different feelings inside of you that go against that.
Yeah.
But that's it. It's each of us, each of us has our own preferences. And so we have to build our lives based on that, not based on, someone else's vision of it.
Right.
Amen.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll end there.
On that note, Melanie and Cory, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening to this great episode. And Please support the podcast by subscribing or leaving a rating and review. We also have a Patreon you can join for more content, and all that information is in the show notes. So happy holidays, guys.
Thank you
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.